Cathy Kelley recently returned to WWE, but a new report reveals she actually held several talks with All Elite Wrestling before making her return to the company. We'll talk on that. Plus, Nikki Cross makes her WWE Monday Night Raw return last night with a new repackaged gimmick. Triple H is back on Monday Night Raw after missing last week's episode. Elias makes his WWE in-ring return. JBL and Baron Corbin continued to steal the show on Monday nights. Champa is out of action with an injury. We've got the ratings for last week's edition of Friday Night Smackdown on Fox. Brock Lesnar is back next week on Raw, and Rhea Ripley body slams Luke Gallows. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of WWE. So let's start off talking about Cathy Kelley. Yes, Cathy Kelley, one of several names that recently has returned to WWE. But could she have been this close to being All Elite as opposed to being World Wrestling Entertainment? Well, an update on her signing and her talks with AEW has been revealed via Sean Rossap of Fightful Select, of course, their Patreon service. Be sure to check that out and subscribe. Ton of exclusive news and tidbits, always doing a great job there at Fightful. And the talent war between AEW and WWE has extended further than just pro wrestlers, it would appear. Now, it was recently reported by Fightful that Renee Paquette would be headed to All Elite Wrestling before her eventual signing announcement. Give Me Sports' Louis Dangour had also heard that WWE had reached out to Paquette prior to her becoming All Elite, but Renee passed on the offer to be in the same company with her husband, AEW World Champion Jon Moxley. But another broadcaster actually went in the opposite direction. Cathy Kelley, of course, returned to WWE, with the company announcing she's rejoining as an interviewer, particularly on the Raw brand. Now, it had been indicated earlier this year that Cathy Kelley had actually had conversations with All Elite Wrestling, according to Fightful. Fightful are reporting that it actually included speaking to AEW President and CEO Tony Khan directly at some point about the possibility of working there, and things actually looked pretty promising, which is a rarity, not the promising part, speaking to Tony Khan, because Renee Paquette, when she spoke about joining AEW, she said, I hadn't really spoken to Tony Khan that much. A lot of people have said when they've signed with AEW, the first time they've actually met with the AEW president is when they're in the go position or gorilla, whatever you want to call it, prior to making their debut. So the fact that Cathy Kelley was engaging in this dialogue with Tony Khan just shows how close it was and how much AEW actually pursued her. However, of course, Kelley didn't end up signing with AEW. Now, Fightful hasn't learned why that was the case or what side ended up keeping it from going down or how far the talks actually got, how close it was, but the fact she was talking to the AEW CEO would imply it was pretty close. Now, Fightful have also been told that Kelley and AEW remained on solid terms before she headed back to WWE. I think some people have said that she's actually in the background of an episode of Rose to the Top as well. I can't confirm that. You can let me know in the comment section below. But, I mean, it's quite funny, isn't it? Because there have been a lot of comparisons recently between Cathy Kelley and Renee Paquette. And I haven't really got it. I understand that they both were backstage interviewers and television hosts, and people like to compare and push people against each other because pro wrestling, that's what social media does. That's what pro wrestling fans do. So I didn't really get that. But the fact that AEW certainly, it's very obvious actually, really, isn't it? Especially when you say, okay, they were in negotiations to sign Cathy Kelley and eventually signed Renee Paquette. It would appear that they want someone to take the mantle off Tony Schiavone. It's what I've said previously. Tony Schiavone is playing the Mean Gene Okerlund role in AEW, in addition to doing commentary, in addition to being involved in talent relations. The guy does a lot. He's a company guy. And obviously, I know he's done interviewing for years, going back to Jim Crockett Promotions, in the NWA, obviously in WCW. But in WCW, really, the main interviewer guy on the entrance ramp, backstage, inside the ring was Mean Gene, and Tony Schiavone has really picked up that mantle in AEW. He does the interviews on the stage, he does the interviews in the ring, he does the interviews backstage, and I feel like with everything he's got going on, with all of the different responsibilities he has, it does make sense to have another person to help with that, but also to eventually take that off, and we have to constantly be moving in that future direction, and that's what it would appear AEW is doing, and Cathy Kelley would have been a great person to do that, but in my opinion, I think Renee Paquette is a more well-known person. I think that's her bread and butter, is interviewing people, and I expect more and more as time and the years go on, her to really grab that Mean Gene role in AEW and make it her own. And I think that's really going to be the case. Would have Cathy Kelley be a success? Would have been a success in AEW? Of course she would. She's a fantastic broadcaster. And it's rare. We've seen it in a couple of recent years, but it's rare that you do get those backstage interviewers in this sort of modern era that do have personality and do sort of transcend just you're a backstage interviewer. We see them all come and go. And it's a very, very rare few that stick around or resonate with people. Again, Renee Paquette was one. Cathy Kelley was one. I think that Kayla Braxton has done a good job. And like I said, in transcending that, just being an interviewer that comes and goes. So I think that all of them are very good broadcasters and very good at what they do. So I think any of them, if they'd went to AEW or now Cathy Kelley's back in WWE, I think they do a very good job. So it didn't work out. Cathy Kelley's back in WWE, and I'm happy to see her back in WWE. I think she's tremendous at what she does. So just a little bit of an interesting tidbit, certainly, that she did have several talks with AEW. Let's talk about Raw last night, and Raw closed with the return of Nikki. Don't call her ASH. It's Nikki Cross once again. Thank the Lord. Nikki Cross is officially back on WWE television. The former Nikki ASH brought back her unhinged WWE NXT persona on this week's edition of Monday Night Raw, making a statement by laying out Bayley, Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair, Women's Tag Team Champions Dakota Kai and Io Sky to end the show on the USA Network. Towards the closing stages of Bayley versus Belair in the non-title match, Cross shockingly returned and took out Sky, Kai, a referee with a huge crossbody, pictures can be seen on the screen, before dropping Belair with a twisting fisherman suplex. The chaotic ending allowed Bayley to pick up a pinfall victory on Bianca Belair. Now, after the match, Cross proceeded to attack Bayley as well, standing tall as the show went off the air. The announcers referred to her as Nikki Cross throughout the segment, confirming that the superstar has indeed at the very least brought back her original last name. It could be the entire Sanity persona. We'll have to wait and see. Cross had been off WWE television since she teased this character overhaul on the September 26th episode of Raw, where she unmasked herself, sat on the mat and burst into tears following her loss to the debuting Candice LeRae. The announcers even alluded to her having a collapse on live television, but didn't provide a follow-up on her status in subsequent weeks. Now, of course, this is a sharp contrast, from the almost a superhero gimmick that she debuted in June of last year, and I wouldn't say it was popular, but certainly WWE went with it because they saw huge merchandising opportunities. It led to her winning the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match. She cashed in the following night on Charlotte Flair, became the Raw Women's Champion for the first time in her career. She eventually turned to the dark side. She betrayed her former tag team partner Rhea Ripley in early 2022. She wore a darker mask. She was then, she was teaming with Doudrop. And it must be said, we haven't really actually seen properly Cross really use her unhinged persona since she got called up from NXT to the main roster shows. Like, she got called up with the former Sanity teammates or whatever, but as part of the Superstar shakeup in 2018, Cross worked in NXT as a singles competitor. She eventually debuted on Smackdown as a singles superstar, but very quickly she formed a tag team with Alexa Bliss, which was sort of a toned down Nikki Cross, and the best friends and the coffee drinking and all that kind of stuff. So this is really the first time we will have seen this version, the more Sanity version of Nikki Cross, and I'm glad to see it. I mean, you don't have to watch any older videos to find out that I wasn't a fan of the Nikki almost a superhero or ASH. The moment I saw it last year, I just rolled my eyes, and I understand that it might have been her own pitch, and I feel like, and I could be wrong here, but I feel like it might have been something whereby, whether you fully believe in it or not, you pitch it because you know the audience you're pitching to. You know this will be something that Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard would like. It was very 1980s, but unfortunately it's not the 1980s. It's 2022, or last year it was 2021. And whilst on the face of it, it can work as a merchandising opportunity of Halloween costumes and masks and outfits and being an inspiration to younger girls, and I totally respect that, and that essence isn't a bad idea. But in terms of a money-drawing gimmick, in terms of being the women's champion, in terms of getting people to cheer for you, people just aren't going to do it nowadays. People don't want superheroes. They just don't. People always prefer the villain. Times have changed. Us as a human race, we've got a little bit more nefarious, and we don't really care for people that are goody two-shoes and talk about honor, dignity, and respect. And this is the character that I think people want to see from Nikki Cross. So I'm excited to see where they go with this. And obviously, as I mentioned, that Monday Night Raw Women's division is absolutely stacked. So interested to see where it goes. Could be a Bianca Belair versus Nikki Cross feud for the Raw Women's Championship. That could be interesting. Maybe it's a triple threat. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, we know there's a female War Games match coming up soon at Survivor Series. Maybe Nikki Cross gets involved in that. Speaking of Raw last night, Triple H was back after missing last week's episode. Things are back to normal at Raw. It had been reported via Sean Ross Sapp that Triple H was back running last night's Monday Night Raw. Of course, he was sidelined from last week's show due to a positive COVID test. However, it was reported he was feeling okay and was just frustrated he had to miss the event. Last week, Road Dogg filled in for him during his absence, and most of the show was written the day before, as was Smackdown. So Triple H was back running the show last night. Not that it really showed, it must be said. I thought of all of the shows under the Triple H era, particularly Monday Night Raw, last night was pretty dull, to be honest. There wasn't huge newsworthy stuff. I know we spoke about Nikki Cross there, but it felt like a flat show. It really did. Again, no real massive segment. And look, every show, every episode is not going to be a home run. Every episode is not going to be a massively newsworthy episode. There has to be filler. That's just television, how it works. You have to go down sometimes, it comes back up. But it was flat. It felt like a very flat show. Again, the audience felt flat in Charlotte, North Carolina. I must say as well, Kevin Patrick on commentary for me just is not working, and it's got nothing to do with his accent or anything like that. It's more so because he's just dull. He doesn't have that inflection in his voice. He feels like he's trying to be too nice. The role just feels too big for him, and I know that's very early to say because he's only been doing 2 or 3 weeks now, but you can tell pretty quickly with play-by-play guys if they're going to get it or not. And I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I'm sure that maybe if he had more time on another show, he could grow into that role. But I think there are better people in that company that are far more suited to being the play-by-play person for Monday Night Raw. And I don't think having Corey Graves out there is enough support for him to grow into it. I just don't think he has it. I thought Jimmy Smith was an excellent play-by-play guy for Raw. Tom Phillips before that, again, was also excellent. Get Mauro Ranallo back, see what Mauro's doing, and get him on Monday nights. That would certainly be spectacular. But it just, Kevin Patrick, as I said, just isn't really working for me. Last night, Elias made his in-ring return on Monday Night Raw. For the first time since July 2021, Elias wrestled a match inside of a WWE ring. While last week, his return concert was interrupted by first Matt Riddle and subsequently Seth Rollins, WWE fans finally got the opportunity to walk with Elias once more. After having met in a backstage segment earlier on in the show where Chad Gable and Otis mocked Matt Riddle and Elias, they decided to settle their differences in the ring. With Otis at ringside, Elias took on Chad Gable in a fun match, both showing off their talents as competitors, including a fun opening from Gable and the feats of strength from Elias. There was a bit of something for everyone in this one. In the end, though, Elias picked up the victory via pinfall over Chad Gable, although after the match, Chad Gable and Otis attempted a beatdown on the solo Elias. He was joined by Matt Riddle for the save, further cementing their possible partnership coming in the future. I don't know if I really have a ton of interest in an Elias and Matt Riddle tag team. He's the RK Bros, his tag team, unless they're going to do something that when Randy Orton comes back, he's going to go, this is your new partner. But Randy Orton's not coming back anytime soon. Chances are he's out for the remainder of the year, possibly longer, with this back injury that's kept him sidelined since the summer. So I don't really know where they're going in that one, but glad to have Elias back wrestling on the show, certainly. Now, I mentioned Raw was dull last night, but the best bit on the show was the same thing that was the best bit of last week, and that was one John Bradshaw Layfield. This partnership with Baron Corbin, it's just brilliant. John Bradshaw Layfield back on television is absolutely brilliant, and Baron Corbin continued his quest to be considered the biggest acquisition on Raw by meeting Johnny Gargano in the ring last night. JBL continued his excellent mic work in the most recent iteration of his dastardly villainous character, hell-bent on harkening back to the Attitude Era frequently and putting down everyone on the current WWE roster. After repeating many times that he was the modern-day wrestling god, Baron Corbin made his entrance, including pyro, debuted even more new gear, much better than the one last week. That gear last week was horrific. What he does need to change, though, is the music. It doesn't suit the new character, and obviously the Titantron needs to change as well, but I think that will come. I think that will come in time. Now, JBL on commentary continued to deride the independent scene history of Johnny Gargano, noting that, quote, 10 years in single-A ball is not a badge of honor, rather an indictment. Not to worry, though. In a run-in earlier on in the show backstage, Gargano got a clean shot in, calling JBL Mr. MC Hammer Pants to his face, referring to JBL's trousers last week, which were slightly baggy. You can maybe see pictures of slightly baggy is an understatement. They were ridiculous. Now, after the commercial break, JBL had more positivity to note about Gargano. However, saying he was an excellent athlete with great in-ring skills. He was incredibly talented, and everyone loves him, but he isn't Baron Corbin, and if he was around during the Attitude Era, he'd be carrying Bradshaw's bags. The goodwill didn't last long, however, after Gargano swiped JBL's hat. For a combination of moves, it was JBL who swept him off his feet on the apron, priming Corbin for the victory. After the interference, Corbin was then able to capitalize, hitting his end-of-days finisher and capture a pinfall victory over Gargano. And certainly, it was great to see JBL back out there. As I mentioned, it's the best thing on the show. I know that the plan is for JBL to be with Corbin for like 6 weeks to sort of kickstart this new Corbin run and persona. Ride it all the way to WrestleMania, brother, because it's the best thing on the show. JBL, with a microphone in his hand, running down the audience, will never get old. Never get old, because on a show where you've got heels, but you don't have heels like JBL, it's a reminder of what wrestling used to be. And I don't mean to sound like Jim Cornette when I say that kind of thing, but it's a reminder of a heel that the audience hates. They like to boo, they run down people, they look down on people, and when they're doing insults to Johnny Gargano, it's going to piss off social media and the internet, and that's the point. It's meant to annoy you, it's meant to get heat, and it's meant to be looking down people's noses at people. So again, I enjoyed it immensely. I've enjoyed Bradshaw immensely back on the show. And again, when he sits on commentary, it's the most entertaining part of the show, because suddenly the commentary is entertaining. Because again, Kevin Patrick just isn't really doing it for me. So long may this continue. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Now, Tomaso Champa, we haven't seen him recently, and we now have a reason why. A top WWE star's absence was confirmed last night on Raw during a segment that went on to get progressively stranger as time wore on. A throwaway line ended up being quite crucial. While The Miz speculated that Tomaso Ciampa was missing due to Dexter Lumis, Johnny Gargano played Rumor Killer live on Raw, reporting that he had just been texting with the star who's been off of television recently, and could report that Ciampa was not missing, he was in fact injured. It must be said, this whole segment, and Ciampa also mentioned recently on Instagram that he's been having some hip and back issues, that might be why. But this segment then involved R-Truth and The Miz talking about macaroni cheese, and Johnny Gargano dressing up as Dexter Lumis. Of course, I mentioned Gargano was in that match against Baron Corbin with JBL at ringside. I don't know what's going on with the writing of Johnny Gargano, but it's not good. Johnny Gargano came off as absolutely infuriating last night. He came off just being incredibly annoying. And that crowd, I know it was meant to be a crowd that was popping the hometown crowd of Charlotte, North Carolina, but it was quiet and the jokes were not going over well. This was a segment, and the way that Johnny Gargano was written last night, which would be completely in keeping with a Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard written Raw. In fact, that segment, I wouldn't even be stunned to find out if Bruce Pritchard had his fingerprints all over it, because that's what it felt like. It was not good. And Johnny Gargano needs to tweak the character, I think, a little bit, or the writing needs to be tweaked for Gargano, certainly. We've got the ratings for last week's episode of Smackdown, which of course featured the return of Logan Paul. And the viewership figure and demo rating for Friday's edition of Smackdown on Fox has been revealed. Per Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, Smackdown drew 2.231 million viewers, which is down from the October 14 show that drew 2.274 million. In the 18 to 49 demographic, Friday's episode scored a 0.52 rating, which is also down from the week prior that scored a 0.54 rating. WWE finished number 3 in the demo on the night among broadcast primetime and cable originals. Only the MLB NLCS game on FS1 and the late NBA game on ESPN outranked SmackDown. So again, it's sports which dominates cable television. I've said it a million times here on the channel, folks. 3 things dominate television nowadays. That's live sport, that's cable news, and that's wrestling. And that's what happened Friday night on SmackDown. Moving back to Raw next week, Brock Lesnar, the Beast, is back before he heads to Saudi Arabia. During last night's episode of The Red Brand, WWE announced that the Beast Incarnate will be in attendance when Raw emanates from Dallas, Texas on Halloween night. On Monday, a video package recapped Lesnar's feud with Bobby Lashley. Of course, he will be heading to Saudi Arabia to face Lashley at Crown Jewel on November 5th. As of this recording, Lesnar's appearance is the only segment that's been announced for the show next week. We'll have to keep an eye out for anything else that has been announced. But Brock will be back on Raw to confront Lashley seemingly for the go-home show. Finally, I do want to talk on this because social media was buzzing last night and trending. I spoke about Raw being a dull show. The two most exciting things certainly were JBL and Baron Corbin and Rhea Ripley dominating men on Raw. The antics of Rhea Ripley continued last night on Raw during a singles match between Kyle Anderson and Finn Balor, which was a good match actually to open the show. Ripley was at ringside, as was the rest of the OC. Eventually, Priest motioned to attack Styles, which prompted Ripley to body slam Luke Gallows on the ringside floor. It got one of the loudest reactions from a crowd that was pretty quiet during the show. Now, eventually this led to the finish of the match. Balor defeated Anderson. Later on, backstage, it was quite funny actually. They did a slightly humorous segment where Luke Gallows was like, right, I'm going to confront Rhea Ripley. This is enough. He came back and he was icing his balls because he had seemingly got a low blow. The OC then acknowledged they have a Rhea Ripley problem and were discussing ways that they're going to fix it. I don't know if this is Beth Phoenix. I don't know if this is bringing someone else in. Time will have to tell. We'll have to wait and see. But there you go, guys. That's the latest WWE news for you today. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below. And I'll speak for you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.